Okay, so we can get started. Welcome to the Politics of a Climate Emergency. My name is André-Yanne, and I am the Executive Director of the Climate Reality Project Canada. I am absolutely honored to be with you tonight, and I'm joining you from Jodage, commonly known as Montreal. The Climate Reality Project Canada's office and my home are both located on land which was long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous people, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe Nation. In the name of our team at the Climate Reality Project Canada, I want to express that we recognize and respect these nations as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which we are today. As we honor the traditional stewards of the land and waters all across the Turtle Island, we celebrate their continuous work to bring back harmony and balance in our relationship to the earth, as well as all the living creatures we share a home with. As I've introduced myself, I really warmly encourage you to do the same in the chat and let us know where you're coming from. And also, you can also let us know which are your host nation that you give thanks to tonight for their hospitality. So tonight, we will discuss the politics of a climate emergency. As you all know, climate change affects us all, no matter our political allegiance. We can't emphasize enough how this is an emergency with a limited time frame to act. We need ambitious policies now to bring the structural and ambitious change that we require to meet the level of this crisis. It must be regarded as the priority issue for all level of government, may it be federal, provincial, or municipal. As we speak right now, as of today, Bill C-12 made through the House of Commons with 204 yeas. It is now in the hand of the Senate to ensure that we have an actual mechanism to increase accountability and reaching our climate targets and commitments. So this is a really good example, and we'll get to talk about it later tonight, on how we can rely on policies to really assure structural and systemic change, as well as accountability from our elected official to meet our target. So this is a critical time. And as we are moving into what we could call an election season in different provinces for at least the municipal level, and very likely we'll have an upcoming federal election, we wanted to give a time and space to support you as climate reality leaders in bringing forward this level of urgency and ensuring that you're able to conduct those conversations and demand climate ambition in all platforms while remaining nonpartisan. So how can you do that? This is the question we're going to answer tonight and provide you with tools to be able to do that with Grant's presentation. You will also have the chance very soon to get a dedicated tool that we will share with you on our website that will give you little tips on how to answer certain question while you're doing presentation. We'll be able to share that link a little bit later tonight. So we will start with a 45-minute presentation by Grant Linney. I now wonder if we still need to present him. He is a retired outdoor and environment educator. If you are a visual person, picture this. His last full-time job involved teaching in a 450-acre outdoor classroom to youth from all groups of age, as well as adults. And I can only imagine, talk about a wonderful vocation. He now retired actually in 2009 and joined us as a climate reality leader at the 2010 training. Since that time, he has been our #1 climate reality leaders when it comes to acts of leadership. He has done over, and actually tonight is his 650th presentation, and he has been doing meetings with elected officials, writing letters and op-eds, as well as directing youth environmental summits. So as we can say, he has been actively retired in the past 11 years. And you can also reach out to Grant if you're passionate as he is about gardening or paddling. He's the person you should turn to have any tips. We will, following Grant's presentation, we will have a dedicated time for question and answers. So please feel free to, as we are going through the presentation, use the chat as a space to share your question. We will make sure to answer them at the end of the presentation. And we will also give you some calls to action to leave you with something to right away get into action and get engaged with. But first off, we have a little poll for you to get to know, to kind of sense what's the spirit in the room. So we would like to know how you would grade Canada's climate performance in comparison to other G7 countries. So you can grade Canada from A to F, and we will then share with you the actual report card of Canada's performance. I see the results are coming in, and we have a lot of C's, a lot of D's, and also a growing number of F. Nobody is giving Canada an A. We have 2 participants who gave a grade of B to Canada, and we're moving to C, 5 of you, D, 6 of you, and F, 4 of you. So we will get a chance to actually get into the report card, but with no further ado, thank you, Grant, for joining, and we will listen to Grant for the next 45 minutes.
Thank you very much, André-Yanne. Very kind of you. Good evening, everyone. I am going to start with an acknowledgement. First of all, the city of Hamilton is situated on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase of 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. And we have much to learn, of course, from our First Nations neighbors. So I am going to share screen, and with any luck, this is going to be seamless. And the first slide you will see is what was shared before we started. The politics of a climate emergency. The politics without being partisan. Interesting concept. I think you will get a good taste of it tonight. Microsoft did not create this message, but it is very true, and I love it. We have encountered a problem. We do need to restart. It's not as simple as pressing OK on a computer screen, but it is possible within a time frame. Mr. Gore frames his presentations in 3 formats. Must we change? And of course, you're very aware of that. Can we change? And there's all kinds of possibilities. And will we change in time? The first 2 questions are answered by science in resounding fashion. The third question has much to do with human psychology and will, not science. And we will be addressing that in terms of how we must stand up and speak up. I have 3 book covers I'm going to share with you in this presentation. The first one is this one. The first author, Christiana Figueres, is an outstanding example of the much needed female leadership we need on climate change. She is the chief negotiator of the Paris Climate Summit and just an incredibly poised, accomplished, and articulate woman. I love the title of her book. It's a very succinct book. It's not that long, and it's inspiring. The Future We Choose. And it's very interesting because psychologically, many of us believe we're not really doing anything right now, and it's not true. We have made a choice. If we continue life as per usual, and we continue to burn fossil fuels and cut down trees, we are choosing a very undesirable future.
What I miss most is the sunshine. But we've been here for a really long time now.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. Temperature today is 127 degrees Fahrenheit. The air quality index is at 420.
This place makes me sad.
Heightened chance of large-scale tornadoes.
It makes Mommy sad. Mommy says baby brother will be born soon, but that it's not safe for him or for me.
Anybody out there? I'd go outside.
Mommy and Daddy fight a lot, but they say it's not my fault. Mama? I just hope we can see the sunshine again one day.
This is not the stuff of fiction, nor some far-off threat.
California is in flames, the most destructive wildfire in the history of the entire town.
This is a clear and present danger to life on Earth.
This is uncharted territory.
The strongest to ever hit the floor.
Officials are overwhelmed.
A catastrophe of our own creation, a climate crisis that condemns our children to an ever hotter planet. Their only home ravaged by storms,
At least 3 dozen tornadoes reported.
The record-breaking storms.
floods,
Many areas will be uninhabitable for months.
droughts, and heat waves,
High temperature records broken by the hundredth.
This is as bad as I've ever saw it.
wildfires,
9 people are confirmed dead in Northern California.
disasters that force millions of families to flee. We have a choice, a once or perhaps last in a lifetime chance to rescue the world we know and the hopes of billions not yet born. They badly underestimate the urgency of this moment and the power of our persistence. We can choose a different path, demand respect for humanity, for all creation, dare a new generation to dream again.
Our house is on fire, and we should get angry.
See my world collapsing around me. Push me to action.
This is not just a native issue.
This is about humanity.
This is a movement driven by our nation's true leaders.
Science should not be partisan.
We're running out of time. Somebody's got to lead the charge here.
Climate change is one of the most urgent matters of our generation.
A people unfettered by fear.
The eyes of all future generations are upon you.
Those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are already doing it.
And there needs to be more of us who are already doing it and telling the others to get out of the way. I like the movement of that video. I've removed a middle portion, which you may have sensed, that was a little bit more US based and political. It starts with a very dysfunctional dystopian future. It moves to the present day and shows we're not that far away from that dystopian future. And then it moves very clearly to the answer. And we need to keep that answer in mind. And we need to keep in mind that this is not fake news. We need to, as climate reality leaders, get past any lingering doubt that science is telling us what the problem is. And here's Neil de Grasse Tyson.
And when you have people who don't know much about science, standing in denial of it and rising to power, that is a recipe for the complete dismantling of our informed democracy. One of the great things about science is that it is an entire exercise in finding what is true. You have a hypothesis, you test it, I get a result. A rival of mine double checks it because they think I might be wrong. They perform an even better experiment than I did and they find out, hey, this experiment matches. Oh my gosh, we're onto something here. And out of this rises a new emergent truth. It does it better than anything else we have ever come up with as human beings. This is science. It's not something to toy with. It's not something to say, I choose not to believe equals MC squared. You don't have that option. When you have an established scientific emergent truth, it is true whether or not you believe in it. And the sooner you understand that, the faster we can get on with the political conversations about how to solve the problems that face us.
A slight note of exasperation in Dr. Tyson's voice, understandable, of course. In that video clip, Dr. Tyson goes on to clearly point out that climate change is an emergent truth. And we can't afford to waste time on people who don't accept that. We need to focus on those who will accept what we have to say. So what refutes science? Better science, and I'll give you an example of that in this presentation. Notice what does not refute science, and I think it's very valuable to put this up front so people might see themselves and take a step back. We are the first generation to feel the effects of climate change. We are the last generation to be able to do something about it. We have a time frame and it's very limited. Basically, we need to show significant progress by 2030 within the next 9 years. This is a headline from today and a news feed that I get called Common Dreams. There is an IPCC draft climate report that is not due to come out until February next year. It has been leaked and it is a scathing indictment of humanity's failure and of how close we are to collapse. Katharine Hayhoe, a very famous Canadian climate scientist, has seen it. And I believe she accepts everything that is said in there and says, this needs to be a wake-up call if we haven't already woken up. So must we change as climate reality leaders? We know this. Can we change as climate reality leaders? We know this. Will we change? This is the sticking point. And I have another video. This is from Fridays for Future Los Angeles. It lasts a minute and it's rather compelling.
Wake up, honey. You have a test?
I'm gonna stay in the office till about 6:30 tonight.
They'll swim for us.
Thanks, Mom.
Lunch is there. Bye, sweetheart. Have a good day.
Our house is on fire. React. Of course, our house is not literally on fire. And because it's not literally on fire, our base instincts are not triggered. This, in the human psyche, is a slow motion emergency. And somehow, and I would suggest this is where our challenge is as climate reality presenters, we need people to understand this truly is an emergency and we must react. And that's the operative word, react. We all know this metaphor, we're all in the same boat. Unfortunately, there are people like the two bozos at the top of the boat that are saying, I'm sure glad the hole isn't in our end, And we're not getting it. We're not getting that climate disasters in other parts of the world, whether it's infernos in California or Australia or flooding in the southern United States or in Asia, are connected to us and that we're all in the same boat. Somehow we need to have a vision of our future, of our children, of our grandchildren, and of the choice we are making for them. And I'm not sure how we do that other than looking at those pictures and looking at these people in the eye. And when I do presentations to these young people, I encourage them to look their parents in the eye and say, I'm worried about my future. So what are the key messages that we need to convey? First of all, this is old language. It's a climate emergency. And it's not a climate emergency the way our current political leaders are using it, where they use the word, but fail to understand that emergency means action. Emergency means action now. So language is not enough. Deeds must follow. And we need to do this in a nonpartisan way. And I hope you're going to see some very pointed slides coming up that are nonpartisan, but expose the utter failure of Canada in particular. And I will tell you right now that my grade for Canada is an F. It's only mine, but you will see why shortly. So I have a neighbor named Howard Barker who is a cloud physicist. I didn't even know that such a profession existed. And I sat down with him, first of all, in 2014, and we created this flowchart, and it's been revised a number of times. And I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. Anthropogenic, you all know what that means. And I think you can follow the flow of the first sequence here and how things are connected. And then we have the loss of sea ice. And of course, there is land ice in the Arctic, like Baffin Island, but the sea ice itself will not create rising sea levels. However, like the land ice, it will lead to global extreme weather events. The loss of ice in the Arctic is related to the drought in California. And for people to understand how those things come together, I think is really critical. Those black arrows represent a feedback loop. Most of you will be familiar with that. I'm not going to take the time to explain it right now. If people want to get in touch with me for an explanation, I'm happy to do that after. Melt is also the melting of the permafrost. The permafrost has all kinds of additional greenhouse gases, including methane, that when there is a thaw, they are released, they go back up into the atmosphere, they make the blanket thicker, they create more heat and melt, and you have a feedback loop. I'm going to get rid of those black feedback arrows because I need the space. Glaciers all over the world are melting, and instead of too much water from land ice melt, now we have too little water for human and crop water supplies. Glaciers are an annual replenishment for human and crop water supplies, and they're melting, they're disappearing. When I speak with grade 10s, which is the largest single grade level I deal with, because in Ontario, climate change is a science unit, I mentioned that when they were born, there was no such thing as West Nile virus or Lyme disease. Those have appeared in their lifetime because of our milder winters and the ability of the bugs who carry those diseases to therefore survive. I think that's self-explanatory. There's two things happening to the oceans. Number one, they are warming up. Number two, they are actually receiving 90% of the carbon dioxide emissions from our burning of fossil fuels and our cutting down of trees. That's the problem, by the way, that gray circle at the beginning. And because they're getting 90% of that, they are acidifying. The carbon dioxide in those two human activities reacts with the salt water to form carbonic acid. And the acidification of the oceans leads to the bleaching and killing of coral reefs, the weakening of the shells of mollusks, the collapse of fisheries. It has a far-reaching impact, as well as the heating up of the oceans. And you notice I've added humans, and at first we seem to be above the fray. All the other red circles, of course, will impact us. Crops and the lack of food, the spread of disease, and so on. And then the final set of arrows, the human impact circles, all point back to the problem. We have absolutely nailed the problem. There is no equivocation here. There is no squirming out of responsibility. If we know where the responsibility lies, we know what the answer is. And I think we need to be clear and unequivocal about this. So how do we get our messages across? If those are our two key messages, climate emergency and where it's all coming from, the burning of fossil fuels and the cutting down of trees, how do we get our message across? I will introduce you to Christine Dow, Dr. Christine Dow, who is a Canada Research Chair at the University of Waterloo.
Hello, my name is Dr. Christine Dow. I'm a professor at the University of Waterloo and the Canada Research Chair in Glacier Hydrology and Ice Dynamics. I'm here in the Canadian Arctic leading an undergraduate field school where one of our areas of focus is looking at the crisis of climate change in this region. Given that the Arctic is warming at 2 to 3 times the rate of the rest of the world, the changes that we're seeing are widespread and dramatic. Behind me is a glacier on Baffin Island, and this is losing ice at a rate of several meters a year that is adding directly to global sea level rise. In the future, this will lead to widespread flooding and mass refugee migration from cities such as Miami, Vancouver, and New York City. The Arctic might seem like a long way away, but the changes that are happening here will affect every single Canadian and everyone across the world. There is, however, something you can do about it, and that is to think about the climate and our environment when you vote in the upcoming federal election. As a collective people, we have the power to bring climate change into political discussion, and it is at the governmental level that change needs to occur.
October 21st is October 21st, 2019, the previous election. I've already had contact with Dr. Dow and actively encouraged her for an update on this for the forthcoming federal election, and she's certainly interested in doing so. Apparently this ad, even though it doesn't say so, was sponsored by Environmental Defense. Dr. Dow does the same thing that Dr. Tyson slips in, and I love this link. Once science tells you there's a problem, we must then turn to the political arena to resolve it. I love that link. And that's the basis of this presentation. We must, absolutely must, enter the political arena, even if it's in a non-partisan way. We need to make our voice heard. We need to realize who is already speaking up and who's alone. I love this image of a person who has left the scene, and hopefully that's permanent. The rest of our world leaders who are trying to do something, but not enough. And that's why we need to speak up to prod them to do more. We need to understand and appreciate that there are major international companies that have made commitments to zero carbon within their own operations. I would love to see them advertise this more and promote this as a government measure also. The United States military, the largest military in the world, identifies climate change as a threat multiplier, as something that makes other existing threats much worse. And even under Trump, who ordered them not to consider climate change, they basically said, sorry, chief, we have to. Human-induced climate change is a scientific reality. Its decisive mitigation is a moral and religious imperative for humanity. I'm not sure how many of you are aware that Pope Francis has a chemistry background, so he actually understands what scientific reality means. And of course, he has the authority to talk about a moral and religious imperative. As a non-Catholic, I'm a great fan of Pope Francis because he has led the way for basically all other major religions to issue similar statements. High fives to the Holy Father. I have checked with priests and they've told me I won't be damned for saying that. And then we have these amazing young people, and we have them taking on new roles, as this sign suggests. And this.
Why did the generation before me leave us with a lot of environmental problems?
Where is the action that was once promised in spirit? There's so much power the world has, but we just don't do anything.
This isn't just us we're losing. This is future generations, the planet as a whole.
For me, this is not a problem that will only affect our future generations, but one that affects me now.
Why?
Why?
¿Por qué?
My question to the United Nations is, why? Why do you sit here and pretend and do nothing?
Why do we continue doing nothing when these drastic weather changes are already claiming the lives of people?
Why wait until it's too late to stop using fossil fuels?
Why do we continue to scour the globe for the last of the dwindling resources?
Why don't you take more action? What are you leaders afraid of?
The environmental issues that are most important to me, for one, it's the drought.
The dredging of the Great Barrier Reef, the deforestation of Tasmania.
The dam that provides my city with water is predicted to be drying up by next month.
All these organisms are becoming extinct.
A floresta amazônica sendo destruída, muita pouca umidade vem aqui para a região sul e sudeste, então provavelmente daqui a alguns anos a gente passa a ter pouquíssima água aqui.
My dad wanted to try put a wind turbine in our garden. The council said, no, it doesn't look pretty enough. If we actually want to try make a change, you've got to help us try make a change.
When my generation grows up, we may not have the time to hold summits about climate because it will have already affected us too much.
To the leaders of the UN, I would like to ask,
why not?
Why not?
Why not?
Why not come up with region-specific solutions?
Why not
make the change to clean energy?
Why not focus on increasing the efficiency of renewable energy sources? Why not inform and engage the students of this generation to act upon climate change?
Why not give tax benefits on green energy?
Por que não criar programa mais forte de proteção ambiental?
Why not be committed to a future for your people?
Me and the whole next generation are counting on you.
Why not now?
Why not now?
Why not now?
Why? Why not? Why not now? Sounds like 6, 7-year-olds, but it's not. 16, 17-year-olds flesh out those questions with very specific points that are compelling and that quite justifiably lay guilt on the adult generation. This is a climate reality project video. It's been around for a few years. I strongly recommend that you use it. I remembered as I was watching this, I have a 40-second version of a Canadian climate reality video that I produced with Hamilton Youth, and I would be happy to share that with you. Again, it's asking very pointed questions and trying to get people to go, whoa, there's a point and there's truth in this. What are we doing? And here's our ultimate hero. She started in August 2018. The school year in Europe starts earlier than ours. And at the beginning of the school year in 2018, Greta decided to go on strike for a couple of weeks. And instead of attending school, she showed up with her sign, School Strike for Climate, at the Swedish Parliament buildings. And part of this was in awareness of an upcoming election. Of course, the media was around, it being the Houses of Parliament for Sweden. And they were curious about this teen in a yellow raincoat all by herself. And they talked to her. And some, of course, asked, why aren't you in school? And she said, what's the point of being in school if I don't have a future? That caught their attention. They publicized her presence and her protest. The Swedish politicians were not thrilled, and they ordered her, I'm not sure how, because I would think Parliament grounds would be public, but anyway, they ordered her off the Parliament grounds. So she went across the street to a public park. The media easily found her and went, hey, why did you move? When she told them, the politicians were mightily embarrassed because this showed up in the media. A year later, Greta is in Copenhagen, Denmark, in front of 15,000 people. A solo person to 15,000. A month later, after sailing across the Atlantic Ocean because she refused to fly, she is part of 500,000 people in Montreal as part of the World Youth Climate Strike. And she spoke at that event. And our dear Prime Minister, of course, had to show up and shake her hand to show his solidarity. I love the quote. We are doing this because we will not be bystanders. We are doing this because we want people in power to unite behind the science. The opposite of bystanders is activist, and it's not a dirty word. An activist is someone who actively stands up for what they believe in, and Greta is the absolute epitome of that. Of course, with the COVID global crisis, our global climate strikes have been much reduced. I'm interested to note that on March 19th, 2021, there were 1,086 protests in 1,086 locations all over the world. And this is one of them. And it got a fair bit of publicity. This young gal is in the Indian Ocean, and good on her. And I'm going to return us to Greta.
My name is Greta Thunberg, and I'm inviting you to be a part of the solution. 5 years ago, world leaders signed the Paris Agreement, and they promised to keep the global average temperature rise to well below 2 degrees Celsius and to pursue 1.5 degrees to safeguard future living conditions. Since then, a lot has happened. But the action needed is still nowhere in sight. The gap between what we need to do and what is actually being done is widening by the minute. We are still speeding in the wrong direction. The 5 years following the Paris Agreement have been the 5 hottest years ever recorded. And during that time, the world has also emitted more than 200 gigatons of CO2. Commitments are being made, distant hypothetical targets are being set, and big speeches are being given. Yet, when it comes to the immediate action we need, we are still in a state of complete denial, as we waste our time creating new loopholes with empty words and creative accounting. If you read through the current best available science, you realize that the climate and ecological crisis cannot be solved without system change. That's no longer an opinion, that's a fact. The climate crisis is only a part of a bigger sustainability crisis. For too long, we have been distancing ourselves from nature, mistreating the planet, our only home, living as if there was no tomorrow. At the current emission rates, our remaining CO2 budget for 1.5 degrees will be completely gone within 7 years, long before we'll even have a chance to deliver on our 2030 or 2050 targets. But I'm telling you, there is hope, because the people have not yet been made aware. We cannot solve a crisis without treating it as a crisis. Nor can we treat something like a crisis unless we understand the emergency. So let's make this our main priority. Let's unite and spread awareness. Once we become aware, then we can act. Then change will come. This is the solution. We are the hope. We, the people.
And by extension, we as climate reality presenters need to expand that awareness. I find this an interesting evolution for Greta. Greta started, or at an early stage, talked about our house is on fire. And I think she's got a similar response to what we see with the Los Angeles Fridays for Future video. So now she's made a subtle shift, and she is saying we need to educate people further. And I have 3 takeaways from her talk that was last December. And 2 of them have to do with enhancing awareness and using metaphors. So you all know this slide. This is a classic Al Gore slide. I would strongly encourage you to add the metaphor of a blanket, because people understand what a blanket does. When you're cold, you put a blanket on. So in terms of our planet, we have greenhouse gases that perform 2 functions. Number 1, naturally occurring greenhouse gases. I'll add that. Number 1, these natural greenhouse gases, of which water vapor is by far the most common, allow sunlight in. It hits the surface of water and land, and it gives us the warmth of life. Number 2, this same atmosphere of greenhouse gases serves as a blanket that, while a lot of heat escapes, enough of it is kept in that we are 30 degrees Celsius warmer than we would otherwise be, according to the Royal Society of Science in Britain. 30 degrees. Our average surface temperature is 14 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure how scientists figure it out. Apparently it's not that difficult, but from pole to pole, including the equator, that's our average surface temperature. If we did not have this blanket, our average surface temperature would be -16. We would be a frozen popsicle. This natural blanket is responsible for life on Earth. As Martha Stewart would say, it's a good thing. Now, the problem, of course, is that humans are making the blanket thicker through the burning of fossil fuels and the cutting down of trees. And when you put on a thicker blanket, you keep in more heat. And people need to understand this and grasp this in the most fundamental of ways. And I love the blanket metaphor. So that's one thing. The other thing is, in talking about temperatures, 2 degrees just doesn't sound like a big deal. And I spoke to a friend of mine I went to camp with, and he has just retired from being the chief of pediatric surgery at Vancouver Children's Hospital. And I said, Jeff, how do I get people to understand that 2 degrees is a big deal and less than 2 degrees is a big deal? And his answer was, think internal, not external. So instead of saying tomorrow is 2 degrees warmer, will be 2 degrees warmer than today, which we are unlikely to notice, think about it as tomorrow your internal body temperature is 2 degrees warmer than today, a low-grade fever, and you will notice that. It will affect the operating systems of your body. If you are doing anything physical, you will tire faster, your reflexes will be off, your friends will be saying, hey, what's the matter? Because they know something's not functioning correctly. 2 degrees, of course, is the original best guess of science in terms of how much we could warm the average surface temperature of the entire planet, 14 to 16. When you think about it as an average surface temperature, you realize that 2 degrees is actually a huge deal. Anyway, that's what we thought. Well, so far, as of a 2020 UN report, we have warmed up the planet 1.2 degrees Celsius. So we're well on the way. Now, of course, this is since the 1700s, but it's accelerating. And it's very clear that we have a time limit on this. Scientists have looked at that 1.2 and they have said, okay, the average surface temperature is now 15.2, not 14. What impact has that had on our global climate? And when they have taken a hard look, they have become alarmed. 1.2 degrees Celsius increase results in heat spikes that are far above 1.2 all over the planet at different times of year and for different durations. 1.2 degrees Celsius average surface increase results in more frequent, intense, and longer lasting extreme weather events. And when scientists saw that correlation, they did a big OMG and said, you know what? We can't go to 2 degrees anymore. Our new maximum is 1.5. And here's a stellar example of how better science refutes earlier science. The earlier science, as much as we had of it, was 2 degrees. Now it's 1.5. And we're at 1.2. And we don't have a lot of time. The last thing we need to take from Greta is she talked about system change. And this echoes a statement that Al Gore used to make, and I'm puzzled that he has not included in his recent trainings. This is a direct quote from him. It is more important to change laws than light bulbs. And this sets some people off. They go, now, wait a minute. Are you saying that my personal actions don't make a difference? No, not saying that. But you need to understand that your personal actions in and of themselves are not nearly enough. So let's take the example of light bulbs. If a system change was made whereby light bulbs, the incandescent light bulb, was made obsolescent by a set date, then we have system change and we all change to LEDs. That's an example. And I really hold on to this quote, and I'm dying to ask Mr. Gore why he doesn't use it more. I'm not sure where I got this diagram. I don't think it's complete, but I love the overall message that our planet, the system, is about to hit the rocks. And there are several lifeboats. Some are directly related to climate change, and you will find them in an excellent book called Drawdown. And others are related issues like social justice. You know, it all fits together. And I think it's part of our job to show how all these various movements do fit together. Anyway, I love this graphic. This is the most powerful cartoon I have seen coming out of COVID. This is from The Economist. It blows me away every time I see it. The battle between Earth and the coronavirus is labeled as the preliminary round. And of course, it's a very hard-fought battle, and we're hoping we're prevailing. We don't have a total guarantee on that yet. But look who's waiting on the ropes. And it's so true. And we have to face this. So when we look at COVID-19 and what the government has done, all the check marks that I show are system change. They are initiatives that have been taken by the government on our behalf. And we are very much hoping that they will result in us winning over COVID-19. Now let's do a similar chart for climate change, which of course has been somewhat preempted by COVID. Question marks, X's, X's. There's a positive one. There's another X. There's another X. There's another X. And there's another question mark. We're not doing nearly as well in terms of system leadership, system change with climate change. And I think the contrast between the two is stark and informative and has to drive us to action. If you have not read this book, this is the single most important book I would highly recommend to you. Seth Klein is Naomi's brother. He was a director in the Canadian Centre for, I'm going to miss the name, Canadian Centre for Policy, Climate Change, something like that, based in Vancouver. This is a superb book, and it's an obvious metaphor. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, I don't need to read the book to get the metaphor. I was wrong. Mr. Klein goes through systematically what Canada did to punch way above its weight in fighting World War II, and consistently draws parallels to what we need to do now. And I highly, highly recommend this book. We need political leadership that seeks to animate the ambition in us all. I love that quote. There's a dance here, and it's not just the political leader saying this is where we need to go. It is us as followers being willing to accept what that leader says. So an example, a cautionary example to me is a number of years ago, Stéphane Dion declared that we needed a carbon tax, and everybody, including members of his own Liberal Party, ran away. So there is an element of, there's a dance here, and we need to get people ready. And I think that's part of our role as climate reality leaders. So let's look at Canada's record. It's dismal. It has Fs coming up, and a likely F with the 2030 targets. As things now stand, we are destined to fail on those guidelines also. Here's the current seats in the Canadian House of Commons, and you notice the seats required for a majority is 170. No party has 170. When these results came out in 2019, I was very hopeful. I thought, wow, here's an opportunity for parties with 20 and 30 seats to really impress upon the leading parties that we must act on climate change. I realize it's probably because of COVID, but I am profoundly disappointed that this minority government has, for the most part, not worked in terms of bringing about meaningful legislation on climate change. There's one exception, one faint bright light, Bill C-12, climate accountability legislation, thanks to, for the sake of nonpartisan, I will not mention the party, but one of those smaller parties pressured the majority party and said, your 2030 deadline for the first target date is not good enough. And in order to get their agreement, the majority party agreed to 2026. A legislative planning and reporting system, the party that pushed 2026 definitely agrees that more needs to happen there. Because of the first target date, because they got a little bit more on the expert advisory panel, they decided to support the current bill. And it has been passed by Parliament, by the House of Commons, and is awaiting approval from the Senate by the end of this week. And it will be interesting to see whether that actually happens. I'd give a C for this. A number of nonprofit NGOs have come out and said, look, this is better than nothing. Let's accept it. Just so you know, there are countries in Northern Europe that are way ahead of us in terms of climate accountability legislation, with much stronger elements in the legislation, including carbon budgets, that we don't have. This is a stunning graph to me. This is the total greenhouse gas emissions for Canada between 2000 and 2018. And you will notice that with minor fluctuations, it has basically not changed. A huge, unequivocal F. And we're allowed to say that because we're not talking about parties, we're talking about performance. This is from the National Observer, and this is even more stunning because it shows, it goes back to 1990, which is where what Europe uses as its baseline. The United States and Canada did not want to use 1990. They wanted to use 2000 because they had a significant increase between 1990 and 2000. Notice the US was able to get it back down. Canada is 21% above their 1990 emissions. By contrast, the United Kingdom is 42% below their 1990 emissions. This is a comparison of the G7s, and this totally embarrasses Canada. We are the outlier. We are the abject failure, and we have to let the public know that despite the claims that we are climate champions, we are horrendous laggards. This is a cartoon that was in the Globe and Mail, and André Picard, who is a highly respected commentator on healthcare, he made a point that this cartoon doesn't just apply to healthcare, it applies to so many aspects of Canadian politics, where we have a government that is seemingly acting as champion and says something should be done, and they're not doing anything, or they're basically doing sweet tweet. Seth Klein talks about a new form of climate denialism, where you have leaders that are laying claim to climate leadership, and they're far from it. And we need to call them out. So let's move to some good news. some governments with decisive action. So Norway, as you can see from this graph, totally dominates the sale of electric vehicles, 56%. They're the closest to them is Iceland at 23%. And you might wonder why. Well, guess what? It has to do with system change. So here is the Volkswagen Golf as it is imported to Norway. There is an internal combustion version that comes in with an import price of 22,000 euros. And there is an electronic version that comes in with an import price of 33,000 euros. By the way, the first thing I should note is that within 3-4 years, that price difference will disappear. The electric version is for all vehicles is viewed as becoming on par with the internal combustion. In the meantime, look what the Norway government has done. They have quite rightly imposed pollution taxes on the internal combustion one, both a carbon dioxide and a nitrous oxide. They have imposed a weight tax, and they have imposed their standard value added tax, which they have made the electric version exempt from. The bottom line is the electric version of the Volkswagen Golf is cheaper. Well, make your public an offer they can't refuse. This is the kind of leadership, this is the kind of system change that we need. A+, in my humble opinion, or perhaps not so humble opinion. So it is so critical that we speak up and that we act up. We must express concern for our future, and not just our children's future, but our future. I'm anticipating that we're all going to survive till 2030. This is our future as well as our kids. We have to demand action and saying you're not doing good enough. And we need to realize that speaking up is not just to the politicians, it's conversations. Catherine Hayhoe, a Canadian climate scientist, says we've got to address the elephant in the room. Everybody knows climate change is a big deal, but we don't talk about it. Well, we've got to talk about it, and we've got to encourage others to talk about it and therefore act on it. And we need to write letters, and letters are much more meaningful than emails. And we need to write op-eds, and if we're good writers, and participate in protest marches, which is not something that I normally do, and litigation and voting, and all of this is becoming an activist. And I'm watching my time and I'm going, oh, I've run over. I'm getting close to the end. This is downtown Hamilton, September 2019, before COVID, part of that worldwide youth climate strike. We need to join our youth. We need to be there with them. There's been a number of court decisions. It's really neat to see that our voice is being heard within the legal system. So the Dutch Supreme Court ordered the government to reduce its emissions within a year by 25%. More recently, the Dutch court ordered Royal Dutch Shell, a huge oil company, to reduce its emissions by 2030 because of citizens speaking up. Exxon, you may have heard that activists have taken over 3 seats, and I'm not sure how many there are in total, but there are 3 activists on the Exxon board, and they cannot be ignored. And they are saying, you guys have to be much more accountable for what you're doing to the planet. Australia, of all places, a bit of a redneck place when it comes to climate change, their court has a firm duty of care to protect youth from climate crisis. And the German and Belgium courts, Belgium most recently, have done that. Our Supreme Court has ruled that the national carbon pricing for the fight against climate change is constitutional. It relates to the peace, order, and good government, which is a POGG clause. They accept that climate change is real and that it's caused by humans. This is, This is very significant, and we need to use this in our arguments to people. The United States, these 21 young people who are now becoming young adults began in 2015. They are persisting. There is a group of Canadian youth that started in 2019. There is a group of Ontario youth that have very notably won their first case, which is the right to present evidence on climate change. The governments typically argue, oh, this shouldn't be the domain of the courts, it should be politicians. The court in Ontario disagreed with them. So this is exciting. So speaking of provinces, you'll notice that most of my speaking up the politics of climate change has been national, but it very much is also provincial. And I encourage you to see this presentation on July the 8th, presented by Climate Reality. I encourage you on the municipal level to take a look at a book by David Miller, the former mayor of Toronto, who extols the power and politics of leading cities throughout the planet that have done many things. It's really refreshing to see this. And related to that, the Climate Reality Project has something called the National Climate League. Yes, it's a bit of a takeoff on the National Hockey League. And it's a friendly competition between Canadian cities as to who is taking the most leadership on climate change. Related to that are, and I'm repeating what André-Yanne will say, but there are community climate hubs that you should look into. System change, not climate change. Use your voice, use your vote, use your choices. This is from Climate Reality. So they are saying personal choices do make a difference, but they start with vote and voice. And we're getting very close to the end, the politics of a climate emergency. My contact information is at the bottom of this, climategrant@gmail.com. Please get in touch if you have any questions or concerns. And on a closing note, go Habs, go. It appears that most Canadians are very excited about and supportive of the Montreal Canadiens' efforts to win the Stanley Cup. If we can shun regionalism and enthusiastically unite behind this, albeit dynamic young group as our national hockey team, then surely we can do the same and more with this one-of-a-kind climate. Thank you very much. Sorry I ran over, and I'm going to turn things back to André-Yanne.
Thank you so much, Grant. I think I speak for everybody by saying that we had a delightful time and very enlightening time listening to your presentation. There was huge interest in all of the videos, I must say, that you shared. Is there a way that people can have those links to watch the video in full? For some of them, you shared some extract. For some others, it was the full video. Where can they find those links?
There's two ways I can do this. One is through Climate Reality, and you can suggest the best way. The other is for people to contact me directly, climategrant@gmail.com, and I will be pleased to send you both the links to those videos and some of the resources that I refer to, like Common Dreams and the Energy Mix and the National Observer, so on.
Thank you, Grant. Absolutely. I think I have already shared your email that in the chat, and when we will share on Hubflix on our YouTube as well, this the video of tonight's event, we will make sure to add in the notes the different links to the video that you shared. So everybody, if you want to have access to those videos, you can go on our YouTube channel next week, and then you'll have the list in the description of the different videos that are in this presentation. So you'll be able to watch them. There were some comments about C12, And I would maybe like maybe to take a few minutes. I know we went a little over time, so by all means, anyone who has a deadline tonight, feel free to go now, and we wish you a lovely evening. For those who have 5 more minutes, I just wanted to react and give you the opportunity, Grant, to maybe talk about Bill C-12 and why, as a starter, this bill can be an important step in the right direction to be passed.
Well, I think when we look at all the F's of our past record, it's very, very evident that we need climate accountability. And accountability includes timelines and targets. And Bill C-12 has come up with timelines, which the original suggestion was 2030 would be the first timeline, which is way too far ahead. So it's with minority party support, it has gone to 2026. And the carbon budgets, the specific targets are still not strong enough, but the minority party decided, okay, we're making enough progress, let's get this legislated, and then we'll make it stronger.
Absolutely. It becomes a mechanism to actually increase the level of accountability and transparency in communicating on the steps towards reaching our target.
Right.
And as I think was the core message of your presentation, what we're looking for here is to keep the pressure on our elected official and ensuring that we have even more ambitious policies, that we demand accountability, that we demand transparency, and that we ask for data on the result. And as one example of how this is done, the National Climate League that you brought forward tonight, Grant, is another example on how people from all paths of life can call their municipality, ask for data, and ask for this level of transparency, and not only accounting for, but also communicating those results on different types of indicators. So that is one step in ensuring, and obviously we need more policies that will go in that direction for all level of government. Did we have, and because we're now a small group left, I want to invite, I saw that there wasn't necessarily more question in the chat. There was great comments in saying that everybody appreciated the presentation. I have fantastic presentation here in the comment. If anybody would like to ask a question, I would like to keep the floor open for a very last question. And if not, you have Grant's email address, so please feel more than welcome to connect with Grant. We don't want to leave you without any calls to action. So depending on the time that you have in your hand and the steps you're willing to take, our number one call to action that we would like to invite you to do is to read our latest blog post that was written by Rihanna Karim Hajani on the power of municipalities to wage climate action in Canada. I will share in the chat the link to this blog post. If you want to learn more about taking action at the municipal level, and if you actually want to contribute, as we mentioned, you can join the National Climate League, and you can even join or create your own community climate hub. You can connect with us at any given time to contribute and participate. Second call to action we would like to share with you is to participate in an event. You did that tonight, so congratulations. You can do it again if you want to also accomplish this month Active Leadership Challenge. Our next event will be on July 8th at 6:30 p.m. MDT. And it is our One Coast to the Other Canadians region Speak Up on the Climate Crisis. And we will be going to Saskatchewan this time and sorry, what am I saying? We're going to be going to Alberta for this. This is going too fast, those coast to coast, and we're already in Alberta. I will share Same thing, the information about this event that will have wonderful speakers, Imen Fouli and Karen Chouette, who will be both contributing to this event. And last call to action we wanted to invite you to do is to actually have your own nonpartisan presentation of the politics of climate emergency. What was done tonight by Grant is just an example of something you could replicate and make your own to adapt it to your context. So if you're interested, please connect with Grant, and he will be able to guide you and mentor you potentially on how you can make it happen for you as well. So this is all for us tonight. Again, we want to stay connected, so please reach out to us and to Grant. I want to share our biggest thanks for Grant's presentation and leadership in making this event happen. Also, a big thanks to Imogen, who was the black square that you saw with our CRPC initial right there, who has been handling all of the tech component. And we wish you all a beautiful, beautiful evening. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Grant, again, and see you soon.
Thank you. Go Habs, go.
There you go.